This is Mindustry PvP. Hex War on the Eviction community servers. I am Lorifeticus. I played this game a while ago. I'm not even sure how long. I got quite a backlog of footage I got no good organization for or idea what to do with, so let's get something done. This game, one of the notable things about it is I am spawning basically alone. There are no other players particularly close to me. So I have free reign to not be bothered for quite a while. And it's all going to be economy stuff in the beginning and not much conflict. No fist fights, no getting jumped by locusts in the first 4 minutes, none of that. Nice and relaxing, yeah. So get out that first tank, take some more space. When I played this game, I was in the phase of fully support that first factory and then move on to other things. Yeah, there's been a lot of change in like what feels like the optimal starting build for different things is. It's in my mind, it's getting to be a good 2 or 3 options. There is a very greedy economy build where you're trying to ramp your oxides and your tungsten sort of at the optimal slope, and there's other ones where you're going more for lots of combat early on, which generally ends up being a locust rush. Yawn. Although you can do that with T1s too. The interesting difference is all the T1 rushing really depends on having a ton of beryllium and silicon, and the straight to locust rush is actually sort of the least demanding as far as resources go. The trade-off there is that once you get that first locust factory, uh, you're kind of stuck. You used all your resources making that factory, and you're not getting income to expand further. So, hope you can do something useful with that first locust factory. Otherwise, there's not really a whole lot of point in making it, and you're going to end up behind other good players. Definitely come around to put hydrogen in your early drills. And don't make dumb mistakes like that. Sand belt is not the same as a flow through belt for everything like I've been used to doing at the time. So there's a missed opportunity. First, second hex open up. Somewhere around the 2 or 3 minute mark. That's fairly good. Good enough to get a little bit more power. Pretty much no matter what you're doing, you gotta get that second hex early. There's not really any sort of good way to 1 hex to combustion generators, which is your only option for getting more power other than turbines. I should put a liquid container on the unused oxide, or the unused ozone output there, but I haven't. There's going to be a lot of those. I should have done something different, but I didn't. I'm missing a liquid router there, so one of those drills is not working even though I bothered to build the pipe. Ooh, map. There are a few other players around, and they are all opposite corners of the map. Plenty of space. Might as well just all economy. Although that's not what I'm going to end up doing. Alright, ran out of graphite. Building graphite. Give it the gas and power. Takes graphite to make those things that you're building. Come on, figure it out. No tungsten production yet. It's pretty late to not have anything of the sort. Although that is much more of a going for higher tech stuff. If you're just gonna spam a bunch of T1, then you barely even worry about tungsten at all. But here it comes. And there's a nice, fairly close 3 turbines that can be piped into it. Yeah, it's annoying that the impact drill wants 12 water, and you get 5 from turbines. So you route 3 of them in, and you end up with 3 extra. 3 extra plus the 4th in the hex will give you 8. And there's not really anything useful you can do with 8. Because the electrolyzer uses 10. So you're short by 2, and a lot of the things that you want to do with electrolyzer outputs are evenly divisible. Sometimes it makes sense to try and get that last 3, sometimes it doesn't. The water output. So all of these are narrow doorways. That's pretty nice. If I had to worry about somebody flying eludes in or just bum rushing tanks or whatever, then those would be relatively cheap to seal off. Especially, up here. 3 hexes with good closed doorways. Here comes some more tungsten. This is before I bothered doing any math about how you can actually ramp these things. I've got a different sort of pattern for the oxide versus the large tungsten bores. We'll start making units. Real amounts of units. It's still annoying how these simple T1 spamming factories, 2 kinds of factories need 3 inputs, and 1 kind of factory only takes 2 inputs. So that makes the elude a lot easier to spam in this way, as long as you built the underlying graphene silicon production to pay for it as fast as it's coming out, which is really easy to not do, because building 3 elude factories like that at as fast as you can go rate actually needs 2 or 3 building material arc factories worth of silicon, which I haven't done, and now I'm going to get stuck with not enough silicon and barely even notice. You can sort of do something where you're manually feeding the silicon that comes out of the factory into the core, and that might go a little faster without building something extra, but that's a lot of fiddly manual work. I don't want neighbors. That is a late joining neighbor, and I don't want to deal with hassles like that. Now I recognize that I actually need the building material silicon, so here comes that. Pretty nice and short to set up. I am floating a little bit of oxide that I could probably be putting to use at this point. Power doesn't look stressed. Hopefully more drills. And one of the interesting things about large bores versus impact and eruption drills is the power consumption. The large bores use very little power relative to what you get from them, and the impact drills are actually really expensive power-wise. And since all the power is going to be coming from oxide and carbide needing factories, there is something to be said for intentionally conserving power by avoiding floor drills. We are producing some tanks now. Oh. And that factory actually doesn't work because there was a tiny little lava patch messing it up. Gross. Should have noticed that when I put it down. And there looks like there's other graphite places around that actually would have worked. I should have just looked harder. Well, I'm going to stop and talk to people. I'm really bad at that. I guess it's a screen resolution. Text so far down in the lower left doesn't really pop into my peripheral vision well enough to make me stop and look at it. So it's real easy to ignore. Especially like if there's somebody that asks something that I want to answer. I don't always want to answer questions. Sometimes it's fine, sometimes it's dumb. Alright. Up to thorium. Alright, things that we want that come from thorium. Build towers, titans, tier 3 prime refabricator. So we'll actually get to that stuff at some point. But until then, we'll build more T1 factories. Building resources are looking half decent for that. This one will finish and not get stuck. It'll take a while for that amount of silicon to replenish. Yes, it has been 12 minutes, and there's no real interaction with any other players, except for that person that spawned late. I assure you, this is actually a PvP game, although the way that the economy has been designed by the game developer, it's unless you put people right next to you, then you're probably not going to, or unless people spawn right next to you, you're not going to see action for a while. Which also the parts of it that I designed as far as the server goes, that's a bit intentional too. If you've got 10 people spread around a map and any one of them can choose to come at you in 4 minutes, which still might kind of be a problem on the Serpulo server, I'm kind of avoiding going back and seeing for myself how well the Serpulo server plays, because the whole real-time strategy control thing affects it a whole lot more than here. Alright, well, I do have my better power plants. And the plan for that is more oxide. I do have like a 6 oxide block that also has a heat output that you can use, and I end up probably not using it as much as I should. By the time it would be good for me to build it, I'm already distracted fighting other players off doing army stuff. In games that I get a good teammate early, a lot of times they'll take care of the 6 oxide block for me while I'm doing the things that I can't help do that are not economic. All right. Upper left, middle left, lower left, upper right. Getting a nice big pile of tanks. A drawback of all these being narrow doorways is tanks and other ground units are going to move through those real slowly and annoyingly and single file. You definitely don't want to do a move into hostile fire all the way across the map. You want to move to a staging so that you can do something smarter than single file them all through a narrow doorway into waiting turrets or whatever else people might have built. No, we'll be honest. It's gonna be a pile of locusts. It's always gonna be locusts everywhere all the time. We'll have to wait another 6 months for the game developer to come back from a vision quest and actually fix the balance in the whole game. Vision quest might actually do him some good. He is not pleasant to argue with on numerous game concerns. I'm sure he's worn out having people, hassle him on chats and whatever for 5 years since he's been the game developer. I can't imagine what a 30,000 person Discord is to be the crown of, but that must be miserable. So he's probably got a good excuse for being difficult to communicate with. This doorway section is the best or the worst of all of them. So anything trying to drive through that one with the green water, the tanks are going to push each other into it and do little bits of damage and slow themselves down. And it's not going to work well. And the other side has got a random wall blocking most of the doorway, but not all of it. So all these tanks I'm making, if I decide to run them this way, are going to be really slow and single file about doing it. And there is a player in that direction that I want to worry about. All right. Yeah, here's my super basic T2 factory. Yes, I know it's not 100% efficient. I know that tungsten from one drill is the bottleneck. I'm taking a long time to place it too. And that's on purpose. I am not religiously demanding that all schematics be operating at 100% efficiency all the time and having blinking or whatever. When I'm figuring out the ratios to put together a schematic, I am intentionally figuring out which resource or construction rate is the actual bottleneck, and then choosing how much stuff it's building that it doesn't get to use because it hit a bottleneck somewhere else. And for this one, you end up not at 100% production rate, so you're wasting a little bit of capacity on the refabricator, the tier 2 one. And I consider that an acceptable loss. For these ones, you're not overpaying a whole lot in any sort of rare resources at this point. For Avert, it's probably a little bit more of a concern because those factories need oxide. So, this game is probably in one of my stints of trying to not use the overpowered units on purpose to see what happens. So, that's Stels and Meroy at tier 1, so no eludes. Eludes are overpowered. They still do a stupendous amount of damage, and it's extremely mobile damage, which is very valuable almost all the time. Concentrating force with eludes is very easy, especially fighting only slower units. Tier 2, it's no locus, so we can use Verts or Claroy. Tier 3 would be Anthicus. That's the overpowered unit there. The tier 3 tanks, they might as well just replace the sprite with an oh no image. The tier 3 ships are, decent. They can't really fight anything on the ground, but they do a really good alpha strike, which is great for going in under fire and targeting down some particular building. Tier 4 is Quell. Quell, because of their artillery stuff, it's just so easy to use, and the things don't even require a tungsten input to build them. It's so easy to build Quells. You just spend a little carbide and you're there. I don't know about T5. I haven't really built any T5s competitively yet at all. Maybe I'll get to that point some point. I'm probably the tier 5 mech is the overpowered one. It's fast. It's like twice as fast as a Locust. It's ridiculous. And it does a ton of damage. I've been hearing people say things about the tier 4 mech, if you micro it, being very good, which is interesting, but I haven't had a chance to try it out myself. Anyway, so building Claroy specifically for the purpose of feeding them into a Anthicus factory. Yeah, whoops. I guess I've not yet decided that Anthicus are off limits for the no overpowered units challenge. So we'll have mostly not overpowered except for the one. And I think I build Quells later, so I'm even like half wrong. So nice big chunk of tanks. Do the power line. Yeah, there you go. Yeah, because adding the mass driver blocks the power connection. Yeah, who do I actually end up fighting first? I'm gonna actually fight one of these players, either the left one or the top right one, at some point here. It's gonna happen. I want those good power plants, so let's get a tiny little bit of carbide. I don't care that it is not even at 100%. I just want a small trickle to accumulate while I go do other things and not have to build a tremendous amount of infrastructure to get it. And what's the point of this weird impact? Well, I wanted to get tungsten into that carboid dude, and I didn't have water there. I had hydrogen, so that's the ground drill that takes hydrogen. All right, my eye has fallen upon the blue player to the left to be, I guess, what I go after first. This needs better water. Yeah, the light indicators on all the buildings on whether they're working or not working or stalled. Uh, that makes a lot of this really easy instead of needing to pay attention to like little animations happening or colors brightening up or whatever else might graphically indicate something is happening. Oh, so when I panned over that base over there, I saw a bunch of eludes. And if there's eludes, then that means the thing that I worry about is raids of eludes just flying past things and back into the stuff they want to shoot. And the way to stop that is either to have strong standing defense covering the entire surface of your base. I guess that, some afflicts or titans could do that, I suppose. Or to completely seal off the entrances with walls or doors. And that way they can't even path into them. And if you want it to actually last, then you need to do it with tungsten instead of beryllium, because beryllium walls have tiny, like 2 armor, and the tungsten ones have 14, and the 14 drastically reduces the ability of eludes to actually take down those walls. So luckily doors count as tungsten walls stats wise, so luckily you can just build doors for all of them. It costs a bit more silicon, and all your units can just fly through. Although if you're focusing on mech units, then you might as well use walls because they'll just walk over everything. So the building portion of expecting to have combat with someone. Red indicator, Sir Power. Gonna put a power plant down. Now I'm going to experience the drawback of having all these narrow doorways as I try and rally things together. Since the top player hasn't really done anything aggressive yet, then yes, I am more confident in attacking to the left first. Probably waiting for more Anthicus to come out, and waiting for that make me think, I should build another factory. So that's what's going on here. And this will be another factory for loading Claroy into a T3. Ooh. People complain about things being too schematic driven. Like, people in the various discords are like, yeah, no, you're just schematic spammers. Which, yeah. But there's not really any way to get rid of that, because if schematics were removed, then people would just make, the code is open source. They'd make custom clients that put schematics back in, or if they're banned, then it lets you do it anyway. So you'd need some other mechanism to balance it. And it occurs to me that you could do like a Warhammer tabletop point system, and so the cost of the stuff in your schematics counts against some sort of pool, and it makes you sort of choose what you need versus what you would hand build. That would actually be pretty cool. Maybe I should do a suggestion on the GitHub, and yeah, no, it would never happen. Guy wouldn't put it in. And it doesn't do anything to actually solve the problem, which I just talked about, which is custom clients can get around stuff, and even if it was a limit and not unlimited, your spell book any limit could just be disabled by a client. So when I play this game, this is at the point where I know that Titans are the thing that I need to hold off piles of locusts. And I've started building those, but I'm not yet you can't just plop 3 of those down and expect it to work. For one thing, it wants a water input, which I didn't notice because I assumed that why would a turret take more than 1 liquid that's done? And turrets take more than 1 liquid now. It's still dumb though. So there's 2 things that you have to protect when you're doing this. You have to protect both the turrets themselves. Well, that should probably be the lowest priority. You need to protect the core, because the easiest way to disable that thing is to take the core and flip the hex so that you lose everything in it. And an amount of units can suicide through the Titan Fire and hit the core anyway. So I put the Titans down to protect from attack towards the north. And then the impulse is to put some on this flank as well. So you need some kind of thorium source to be the Titan ammo. And you probably put an overflow on it so that once it fills up, then you're actually getting building materials. Although I don't really use tech stuff at a rate that the 2 little boards I already have making thorium are fine. But the thorium does go into the Titan, so I could still run it out that way. If I weren't running out of silicon. I never actually built more building material silicon factories, and it's not coming in fast at all. Though actually, I've invited another player at this point. So there's somebody else building things, and maybe that's where the silicon is going. The best available building to produce silicon has no silicon in its requirement and has no upgrade. That's an annoying thing about Erekir in general. There's only one way to get sand, and there's no better way to get sand. The wall drills are a little more interesting because you've got the optional liquid to feed into them. And then all the ground drills are boring with, 1 input of gas or liquid or whatever and 1 output. We still haven't finished those Titans over there, although the silicon has recovered a little bit. Oh, I have not invited the other player yet. I'm the one that put down the carpet. So I was expecting eludes to try and come through here, and this is all stuff being put up to stop that. But it looks like I'm never gonna get that attack I'm expecting. Still hungry for silicon. Alright, yeah. And finish off the T3 factory. So that all makes sense there. Setting up another Anthicus factory. Yeah, and convenient that thorium bore setup was already there. Oh. So now I see upper left corner, there's a long line of green moving. So that's probably a threat that I need to get into my mind as being the final villain in this game is going to be upper left corner for sure. Go through, oh. And they're moving through the middle. So now we'll actually start having a fight. Micro goals here. Oh, it's the eludes shoot back at the homing missiles and shoot them down. So taking them out with the Anthicus while the eludes were shooting at the core directly, that works out well. Something had moved forward unopposed and actually took that out. Maybe even on an attack. He does have his standing army, which unfortunately all of them were in that hex when it destroyed and were hit by the core explosion. I can siege from here decently well. Put the tanks in the way, it'll work even better. And with the extra cover from the tanks and the clear point effect sucks, and it doesn't even work against homing weapons. They just use their conventional things. Oh, there's the baffle. So push my Anthicus forward, and then use that as cover to move some other little guys forward. They'll draw away the counter homing missiles, and you'll end up taking out the opposing Anthicus. There are locusts. That factory hasn't been running for long enough. You need a lot more stored up. That's not advised. Titan placement. Well, so that'll shoot the core next to it, which fine. It's not gonna cover the entryway to this hex well. Like, you could cover 2 entryways if you place that in the top of that hex. I have, since this game was played, put a nerf on Titans where if a Titan is close enough to a core to destroy it, and it gets destroyed, then the Titan gets destroyed. And so that makes it real expensive to try and destroy cores with Titans, because you gotta rebuild the whole thing every time. And hopefully that'll make Titan pushes a lot less a thing that happens. Building versus building is the worst. And when things happen like Titan damage amounts on buildings, then I'm gonna blur that out. I don't want any meta commentary during this. I'm gonna lead in. Who cares? Did this end up being interesting? Yeah. Yeah, I guess. Here it is. Alright. I got my good power generator. I got multiple Anthicus factories. I got all these tanks left over. Go. I'm pretty sure the goal here is to finish this person off and get them on my team. Dude really needs to write better code for the way that the missile graphic works. Like, I understand that the missile explodes early to stop people using direct control ranging to increase the range of things. But there's got to be a better way to do it than that. Like, the explosion range has an extra factor, or the weapon range has an extra factor for the explosion size and cuts it off so that if the thing is closer, it still actually hits what you're shooting at instead of always exploding early. So I saw some blue locusts, and they've been left alone the whole time. So there'll be a sizable amount stored up. And sort of to improve the defenses of that hex on the right. And, you know, those green tanks. Gotta worry about those too. Yeah, the baffles schematic that I'm using sometimes here. I spent some time in Sandbox running big piles of ground units through different patterns of walls with gaps to see what, you know, slowed them down, got them stuck the most relative to the cost of it. And I ended up making those offset grid of walls that fit together. And another point of doing, well, they're not walls, they're doors. And a thing that you can do with them being doors is you can freely move your units through it. And if the door is down, then bullets still hit it, even though units can pass back and forth over it. So if you've got like all these doors around and you're having a firefight with opposition, their shots are being hitting the doors instead of your units. So it works as cover, and it works as a slowdown while not slowing down any of your units at the same time. And also not being the cost of just filling the entire thing in a straight path with doors. So that is targeted to try and destroy the hex that has that green army parked on it to thin them out. The orange player left, so there's not much opposition around that corner. And up, yeah. Oh, that player's gone. Those baffles I was putting in were to protect from green. Yeah, this is the fallen team at this point. Expensive. Real expensive. So mop up orange, take that spot. They're going to be making their own Anthicus. They've got a fair amount of economy up there. And that's a T4 factory. Yeah, there's quite a few of them on that team by now. Oh, there's an Afflict. So I'm going to move quickly there and see if I can take that out before it gets too accumulated with other stuff. Yeah, this is an interesting map, how there's sort of clusters of buildable space, and then they narrow down to these choke points between a few sections. And one of those has a mech only wall on it. The one that's further to the right here. All right, here's a learning moment. I am trying to spread out the incoming vector of the missiles for shooting them at that Afflict. And I'm going to learn how well it works if you shoot spread out missiles at an Afflict. It's an effort to sort of increase the ability. And this is it working poorly. The Anthicus get hit enough to really hurt him. And the trailing bullets from the Afflict shot take out the homing missiles while they're doing it. So there's enough split projectiles that it makes it very good for stopping incoming missile assaults. So I want Titans over here so that I can hold any of this space against the inevitable pile of locusts coming through. I am not accumulating Anthicus's fast enough to just brute force through a locust army. And having been directly controlling them when they were so closely injured by the Afflict, trying a healing battery on these things, since the effect is stackable from multiple healing blocks. Probably. Well, if they're all off phase like that, then definitely. There are lots of fallen players able to pay attention to a lot of different things at a time. I'm still making a bunch of tanks, but now they're a pathfinding liability because they have to go so far through a too complex arrangement of tiles. So like if I took a bunch of tanks in my base and gave a move order to the upper left, they would not move at all. Observer is just too big for the source code. Yeah, there's a ton of waiting just for rallying to take place out of all the leftover tank factories that have been going this whole time. So I have a ton of these tanks, and they're pretty much useless except as targets to draw fire for Afflicts and Titans. And Scathe, if they... Nope, they'll probably be a Scathe. So now we're heading up to get the Titan there. This attack is failing, although part of that is trying to deter those locusts from coming through, which I don't think this tile would actually be able to hold those locusts until the Titan goes in. But instead of pressing that attack, they're building more afflicts. More Antheguses. And those need healed up too. So now we're ending up with a fortified standoff on both sides. And that makes it necessary to consider, instead of going through the difficult choke point, what are other options? Well, there's this entryway. There is the T4 tank factory, which is very close to the front lines and in a questionable position. And there's all the entryways that are around the upper right. But getting any of the tanks to that position would have to go through the puddle and wall narrowed entryways that are in my base, because there's no other access point except through this choke point, which is the thing I'm avoiding. We're making an honest effort at pushing through it, but not enough homing missiles. They're getting shot down a bit too far out. Everything's repairing. No, this is not a position that will be easy to cut through. So the big conflict stalemate point is setting up on that left border, multiple afflicts. I've got Titans, a bunch of units on both sides. They can shoot homing missiles at each other and not really get anywhere. The tons and tons of tanks that are gonna come out, they're really hard to use at this point because there's limitations on their orders in large games. You can't really send them real far, or they might just not move at all. They are successfully wrapping around both sides, which should be pretty useful. I have some opening on the top center, so if I can concentrate attacks there before the same amount of building up can happen, I might be able to break in. And he doesn't really have good options for moving forces away from this position because I've got enough units banked up there that I have a reasonable chance of being able to push through. There's a smite, and the defense against smite is walls of ducts. Ideally, I would also want to have a build tower there replacing the ducts, and then that would be indefinitely fine from the smite. Oh. He will easily be able to push into this with the locusts, and it'll be real expensive to do so. thinning down the locust spam numbers is also a pretty useful goal at this point. And the tier 1 tanks are basically free for tactical use, so there are meat shields, distraction for weapon turrets, all sort of stuff. I've decided to take my main force, which is the Anthicus that I've accumulated, and I'm going to move them around to one of these other fronts. They are stupid slow though, and that's going to take a long while, and if someone were looking for it, it would be real easy to see, but you know, who knows if they'll spot it or not. It's also interesting that the Anthicus and the Claroid that I have can move through this center position and into that T4 tank production. And those tanks are going to have a real hard time fighting back when they literally have undestructible walls in the way that I can retreat behind. So now he's nervous about that position that I did that tank push onto, and is starting to build up there. And while they're worried about that, the Anthicus are going to come into position. This batch of tanks is coming down to support those. They are vulnerable while in this hex. If that core can be destroyed, that'll take a bite out of them. I want to avoid that and be prepared to walk them back. But it looks like nobody's paying attention, so this has a good chance of winning. And the walls on the other side of it are going to make it a lot harder for any defensive unit movement to come stop this before it happens. So that takes care of their T4 tank production. And I've got a really nice defensible position in here that I can launch these artillery from. The entrance is narrow, and I can get a nice surround on that pretty easily. He's going to have to turn a bunch of stuff around to come down here, but it's all got to funnel through that choke point. I got plenty of tanks here to put in the way to stop them from actually hitting the Anthicus themselves. Although those are going to melt down pretty quickly, and I still might be stuck losing a core explosion worth of units if they push all the way through into that core. So it is probably time to run away from that point. You always need more support than you have. And while this is happening, they're starting to try and get some defenses now that this hex is up there. I can take out that heat snake. The diffuses, they're there. Close to enough Anthicus that the homing missile concentration is enough to actually get through that. So there's the threat. So they're going to hit that core, and I'm going to lose a big chunk of that. And that takes me below the critical mass there. And I had to take another chunk of it. So, yeah, I just lost the big important chunk of my army. So the remainder of those will run away, and let's see what else we have able to bring up. Teammates made some quells. Those are going to come in handy and be a bit more useful than the Anthicus with the better mobility and range. These guys have an order, and they won't move on it because the game systems are implemented badly. So I have to give them much shorter orders and repeatedly to actually get those units to go somewhere useful. And we also need to sort of take a scan at what the air defenses are around that perimeter. This is probably enough that I'll be able to push back into that section that I just took. They could be rebuilding that T4 factory, but they're not. And it's still a problem that there are really no good tank routes from all of my T1 production to anywhere it would be useful to put those tanks. So now using the Claroi as support, it will cross over these walls where the locusts aren't. And moving up the Anthicus for the sieging. My priority is taking out their Anthicus. And that's working. That's good. More units to bring forward. It would be nice to all select factories and set the rallies up here. Although it might be too far that the units wouldn't even move. It might do a "you're commanding too many blocks at a time, stop it" message, which sucks. But even at this point, when you have 30 or 40 unit factories, giving them all new rally positions is a significant amount of work. So we've got these Anthicus accumulating, and there's Quells accumulating from factories that some of the invited players built. Both of those are going to come in handy, and we're just going to keep probing different sides until something breaks through enough. The first go is going to be here. Ugh. And there's the Scathe. Need the defensive ducts to stop it, which worked pretty nicely. These on the lower left here, opposing Anthicus, those are kind of isolated. Those I can probably take out while also protecting the core with all those Claroi. And spamming ducts to stop the effectiveness of missiles. That Titan is a threat. I might have to send away some distraction Claroi to draw out shots, but it's actually, he's still got to get hydrogen from somewhere, and he doesn't have it. So I do have time. Alright, there go the distraction Claroi. Well, those are moving up. The Anthicus try to land hits on their Anthicus. Now he's got locusts moving forward. And I'm taking Titan hits. So I got to pull all of that back. And that Titan is core range, so a lot of this is going to get a lot tougher. Although they have to manually load the ammo into it, so that's a lot of extra work from a player perspective that can be, easily forgotten about. While they're focusing on there, I've got an opening to hit the right side of this Stalemate hex over here that has been like this for a long time. There's a fair chance that I'm actually going to be able to cut into this. Especially all those disperses are shooting at both Quell rockets and Anthicus missiles, so they're doing a lot of turning, and we do manage to cut through it. And all of these units are sitting here ready to go to move up and consolidate into that. So that was a breakthrough. We're running for it. We're going to see if we can consolidate and build up into this additional territory. All those locusts coming down are a problem, but if I target the core, then I can hit a big attrition on them. So that got a lot better. Those are also vulnerable to all of the homing missiles, which I've got multiple sources of now. There's a power plant that I can hit. That's a nice target of opportunity. And it's still got a great choke point funneling stuff coming into here. And now with this hex taken, I've got a bigger foothold to sort of push into their space. This upper left hex here with just a power plant, and that looks like a good opportunity to go around static defenses. There's a lot of valuable stuff that I can hit from here. There's only one air defense from that position, so the Quell should be able to do good. Spreading them around in an arc so that the disperse can't hit as many homing missiles coming in at a time. And now they're pushing on that core, but I've got quite a lot of stuff wasn't actually in that hex when it went down. So that was a pretty fair trade-off, and it's going to be easy to take it back too. Got a nice chunk of static defense that I can take off of this hex here. This is actually getting, it's close to out of range of life support attrition. But also, this piece of unit production here, 3 prime reconstructors, I definitely want to take that out. So we're all down a fair amount of army, and I've taken some unit production, some power plants, and some of the static defense. So I am making forward progress here. And a lot of their units are forced to stay in the backfield as extra defense against potential assaults. So a lot of this north section here is very open and very at risk of being hit by Quells, and they're able to move through pretty easily. They'll get one more to the left, and then there's some disperses around that will need to be thought about. This one in the middle is another target of opportunity, pretty easy to get. Go back and see what reinforcements are available. Probably a lot, and probably all stuck with orders that never actually move them. Yeah, there's a bunch of nice stuff, and I got a lot of space to move it into also. I think he's got a locust factory rallying to that forward point, and that's why there's a constant stream of 1 or 2 locusts coming through. I don't want to chill out in this position with the Titan that's going to be constantly flipping that core. Oh, this stuff is so slow. Yeah, it's a pretty interesting map geometry with the 3 different pathways from one side to the other, but one of them is only open to mech units. There is a tank trapped on an island of Arcosite that got pushed there when a large group of tanks moved through. They push each other into slag, into green water. Titan, disperse. There's a luster in there. Build towers. Sublimate with ozone with no tank. And afflict. Just a whole random bunch of stuff in there. Trying to find all of the random Anthicus that I have spread around now. Trying to get the tanks to actually go somewhere useful. Those aren't moving. None of this stuff is moving. I definitely need to worry about that accumulating locust blob up there. The fast way to deal with this would be to just hit the core that it's under. And I will definitely want to go around this hex here on the left that they are continuing to fortify more and more. Always go around if you can. The stream of reinforcements into that is really easy to pick off one by one, but they'll be able to cut through to that core also. This core in the middle still has a Titan in range, so that's not really useful to take unless I have a plan to also do the Titan. There are some targets of opportunity on the left there that one of the other players is taking some quells to deal with, like economic stuff along the wall that is out of the range of disperses. Really, if I accumulated some quells, then they could probably cut through in there. If I get everything positioned here, then that locust rallying will just head straight into the mouth of stuff that will kill it with almost no trade-off. I can focus on actually getting reinforcements to move to somewhere useful. 8 selected Claroy factories. Get them to move somewhere useful by default. Yeah, it seems to be a lot of people that argue about game balance that don't understand that player attention is the most limited resource. And so doing things like you manually have to tell a unit to do anything, you manually have to tell a factory to rally to a particular point, that is not a substitute for having a broad or sustained attack command. Like those people that argue from that point of view are clearly people that both have only played the campaign and think that the campaign is hard. The campaign is not hard, the campaign is just something that takes a long time to grind through. Wait for resources, accumulate units, attack the thing. Build the right units instead of the wrong units and attack the thing. Take advantage of how cheap quells are and make a bunch of quells and kill everything. Oh, there's green floating around there. And if green is doing any sort of defense management, then that is probably going to be the most effective defense, whatever he chooses. So this spot here, there's the Titan to worry about, so bringing the Anthicus close isn't great. Although I did manage to cut it down, which is good. I got the distraction clairvoyants moving in. Yeah, we're pretty much just trading army back and forth here, and hopefully I'm not going to lose these Anthicus, but they're kind of stuck, not going to be able to do much more from this point. Although it is drawing a ton of his units in this direction, so I can just walk away. So many tanks. Yeah, those are probably a lost cause, actually. But these are good. And yeah, 8 of those is probably enough to start doing things. So we're going to split them to make an incoming missile arc and try and cut down some of the air defenses here, as that'll be what I actually need to take out most critically if I'm going to move into that, failing to go around at Hex. I am putting some damage on the walls, and the build tower can't quite keep up with rebuilding them. Their power looks a little sickly, so that might be a problem and help with slowing down their production. But all of this stuff is gonna be sent towards attacking that upper hex, which is protected by walls from locust retaliation. These air units are gonna take care of that Titan pretty readily. He's got to move everything back up there. Plenty of Clairvoy to offer distraction fire. Build an arc to the top here and maybe wrap around in that direction. A lot of those defenses are focused on the bottom half of that hex. Clairvoy point defense doesn't even do anything against missiles. They're using their regular guns. Clairvoy point defense sucks. Range is too short to ever destroy anything important before it gets within its area effect range. They're very important for keeping that particular core alive, as I've got so much stuff, valuable stuff sitting in this hex. The missiles are cutting through the wall, and we'll be able to start thinning out those Anthicus numbers. Clairvoy are doing their point defense to the Titan shots, and it's making it a little bit less effective, but not much. The artillery shells from the Titans still explode, and they still do it close enough to damage some of the Clairvoy, so they can't sit there like that indefinitely. Yeah, so if those locusts want to do anything here, they have to go all the way around. And that's going to happen single file, and that's pretty easy to cut down. And then that makes me realize that this hex here in the middle, I guess they added defense. That used to be, or was it the one further over that was very open? Anyway, this one is a much more tempting target than the upper one there. The repairer is probably slowing things down. That's a good target to get down. Sure, they can get close, whatever. That just makes the homing missiles explode more on target instead of the stupid implementation where they always prematurely detonate. Just trying to bring that Titan back. I don't want that to come back. Yeah, that's easy to take out. And some of the belts have been cut, so a lot of these air towers are now also in a bad place. So that's a good sustainable attack, and it doesn't really need reinforcements at this point. So everything that's coming out of the rest of the base is hopefully being put to good use by the other players on my team. I got a glimpse of it in the lower choke point a minute ago. We're 8-9 minutes away from the end game triggering, which we're also in a good position for that if it gets to that point, because I've got 80% of the map here. So the obviate spawns will be definitely in my favor if that time comes. Yeah, so this hex is broken. They're gonna hit that core. And then it looks like we can head straight to the left there, which has a lot less air defense stuff and some juicy economy pieces, and just Titans in it. That's got a big long carbide heat snake. Looks like they were putting carbide into cargo drones for the purpose of sending it off to scathes. A string of what? 6 locust factories. Alright. And there's green using the fast ducts to stop homing missiles. But we've got enough stuff that we can, without it being defended, we can cut through that pretty readily. And then we just, hit the core and keep moving left. There's a Titan down there that's going to be bad for these Claroi, but they can move out of range. And now we're getting into the good stuff. This wraparound is going to keep going. Oh, look how slow all those productions were going anyway. Yep. That was the break. All this is just going to roll through at this point. Big siege at the end, pulling it out. It's making a lot of nitrogen there. Yeah. Oh yeah, nitrogen was for the lusters that they've been putting around. It's really funny to watch lusters shoot at homing missiles because they're so slow to rotate and target. So the thing is launched, moved, and gone all the way to its target before the luster even gets part way towards actually hitting it. Yeah, and then on to this, the last citadel. Those tanks are doing a surprisingly good job moving through that narrow gap. Players at the end. Multiple leads.
Well, and then the mop up. One more mop to up, and then we're done. Boom.